Welcome back, everyone. We are at yet another diatribe because I'm always on one, and I'm always trying to give you guys something to really kind of dig into and to get different perspectives from people that I admire throughout the world. And I'm super excited to have one of my, I call him a friend. He might be like, we're just acquaintances, relax. But I like to call us like salt and pepper shakers, like, you put your head over there. But he's someone that I met, has it been a couple of years already or like a little over a
Yeah,
year?
a bit over a year,
Oh
maybe.
yeah, almost
Yeah.
rounding into coming into two. But he's someone that I met in Australia, oddly enough. And one thing that I loved about him is he was actually in this sort of life transition at the time that I wasn't quite aware of. And then all of a sudden I see this email, or it was I think a notification. I moved to New Zealand, to sort of like refine my roots and everything else. And I'm just like, yes, I'm here for that. So, and sure enough, when I went to New Zealand, I got a chance to see him. So without further ado, this is Stanley Henry. He's, again, someone that I admire tremendously just because he is the epitome of grind. This kid is the biggest grinder I've seen in a long time, and he's got fitfo like you would not believe. So Stanley, please give just like a quick introduction of yourself, and I think just let the kids know who you are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Pretty humbling introduction. We definitely are friends, and it's been an awesome friendship. How it evolved, which is quite cool, and there's a whole backstory to that, but probably don't have enough time. But anyway, my name's Stanley Henry, and I run a company called The Attention Seeker. And yeah, I've been going through a bit of a life change over the last 12 months, and just as you said, grinding everything I can out and just trying to give it my 100%. And if I want that 1% life, I need to do those 1% actions. So that's been the motto.
I love that motto, by the way, because you're right. I mean, a lot of people, sort of look at that 1% life as this grand goal or whatever else, but they don't want to put that 1% energy in there. And here's a question. We can just kind of jump right into it. Like, do you think there is sort of like a magic key, or like a magic way of doing things that kind of makes you a one percenter? Or is it really everything that we have sort of, within our own two hands?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key points. I don't think there's a magic bullet, but I do think a few things help. I think, as we just said, hard work is definitely one of it. A lot of people don't have the energy or the desire to put in that hard work, and it's not for everyone. And I think it's okay. I think that's a good thing to understand too. It's okay for it not to be for everyone. Like, you don't have to want that life as well. But so I think that hard work, but also I think what I've found over the last year is your relationships and how important that is, and how your network is everything. And it just opens up opportunities and business and life and all sorts. And I think if you're looking at a 1% life, you can't be closed off to meeting new people and developing new relationships and giving them your full sort of authentic self every time you meet all these new people.
Right. And I love that you mentioned that, because if there were a magic bullet, as far as I'm concerned, it is your network. It is your sphere of influence. It is you being able to reach out and leverage all of those relationships and connections that you've had over your lifetime, or however long you've been at whatever it is that you've been at, and doing that, at the drop of a hat, and not thinking twice about it, not feeling any fear of, oh, are they going to like judge me for reaching out because I need help with, or, oh, are they going to, think I'm a douche because I need that one connection I've never been able to get, and I know they're best buddies. You know what I mean? You can't, I've always been a believer is you've got to stick your neck out, and you've got to just ask the question.
Oh,
We've all heard the word no a million times. I mean, is that something you can talk about with regard to how you've done a great job at leveraging your connections, and you've built them like right before my eyes, which is just amazing to watch.
yeah. Look, when I made the decision to move back to New Zealand, especially, I had been gone for 12 years. So my networks were just dissipated here. I had nothing. Even school friends had moved on, had their own life. We hadn't been in contact. So I literally built my network all from the ground up when I moved back to New Zealand. Yeah, I was coming home, but I hadn't lived my adult life here. And so I had to start again. And I just said yes to everyone. I asked so many people to catch up for coffee, catch up for lunch, and just put my neck out there. And I was asking these, big important businessmen and businesswomen and like some people who had done some amazing stuff. And I thought, you know what, it can't hurt to ask. And surprisingly, I had very few. Well, I had no one say no. I just had people may have ignored my messaging, and that was fine. I didn't spam them and keep going. But I think that by putting my neck out there, I just met so many people who were really keen to just have a chat. And as time went on, that grew exponentially, and until the point where I was meeting 20 to 30 people a week.
Right. Like, let's not discount the fact that you went on tour. Like, you went on a full-on MF tour. Like, I was just like, this kid is, what the hell? Like, he needs an assistant, because I don't know how you kept all of, like, 20 to 30 a week, right? Was it 20 to 30 like a week?
Yeah.
I mean, that gives most people hives if you think about it. But, look how quickly you've built. And again, I've watched it like just manifest like this, whoa, like the network, the different opportunities, like the quality of people that you had on like your own podcasts and video, your vlogs and everything else. I'm just like, wow, that is a masterclass in how to go from literally zero to, who everybody, I'll be honest with you. I mean, clearly people know who you are now in New Zealand, like that. And it wasn't, it really just came down to, like I said, sticking your neck out there and asking the question and, having faith that people, would kind of see that your intentions were good and that you wouldn't be wasting their time. And
yeah, exactly. And I think that was, you hit the nail there with your right intentions. Like my intentions with everyone that I met was genuinely to get to know them, and then wherever I could give them some value. I knew that I had a lot of experience in what I did, and I had a lot of knowledge. And so it's just about how can I give some of that away? How can I give these people something? There might be some opportunities that arise from me. I knew selfishly that, if I meet enough people and I give enough value, that some of it will come back to me. So I'm not trying to be, naive about that. I knew that that was the goal, but my true intention was just to meet as many people as possible, see what's out there, give value as much as I can, and just be as genuine as possible when I met these people. And that paid off in dividends, because they knew that you can smell a rat. Everyone can smell a rat. And so a lot of those relationships that I built in the first 6 months of New Zealand, they're still all close friends and colleagues and business partners and things like that. So because of that network I built, you can tell it's sort of proof that it was genuine, because I've kept those relationships live and I've really tried to give as much as I can to all these people that I've met along the way.
I love that. I want to drill down into, the sort of concept of providing value, because I think that's where a lot of people struggle when they sort of build networks is, for instance, if they're reaching out to, Bill Gates just randomly expecting him to be like, sure, I've got 15 minutes for you. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people shy away from those introductions just because they feel like they can't really provide the same value that they're probably going to be getting. So, but I think people don't also realize there's this sort of intrinsic need for people to teach. So I always tell people, give people a teaching moment, and I promise you they'll jump at it, because I think innately as humans we want to help. We want to assist other humans in any which way, shape, or form that we can. That's just an innate need, if you will. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you approach, providing value, for instance, if you're not on the sort of level playing field necessarily, but...
Good question. Ask questions. And that is the answer, is just to ask questions. It's that old, I got taught from my old sales manager who worked for me in Melbourne a lot of tips on sales. And one of her best things was asking people questions. And she would have these conversations with people, with clients and prospects and things like that. And you thought that she just would talk a lot. You always think, she's always talking. But when you really dug into it, she would only probably say 4 or 5 things. She just asked these questions of people and they would start talking themselves. And so I took that approach and I applied it for when I met people, because I was like, what am I going to talk to these people about? I don't know them from a bar of soap. So I just would ask some questions, and, I've looked at their LinkedIn page and whatever, and I tried to find something that I could relate to. Once you start getting them talking, and you just let them talk and you stay in the silence and you just let them come out with it, and because peak humans want to fill the silence all the time, as I asked them a question, they said one answer, I stopped, I didn't answer anything, they would say more, I'd keep quiet, they'd keep saying more, and eventually they got to a point where the challenges and problems started coming out of that, what they faced, you know, what are these things that they're going through in their business or their life that they're challenging, and then I could ask more questions to help them sort of find their own way through that. And I did that a lot as a leader when I led hotel teams. And so to answer your question, I asked them lots of questions. I sat in the silence until they gave me more, until they felt comfortable to open up and fill the gap. And then they told me their issues and challenges and whatever. And not all of them are major. Some of them are just, I'm struggling to get this client over the line, or I'm struggling to do more content, or whatever it might be. And then I would add my 2 cents in, what I think I could do or what I've heard. And I always would try to relate it back to a person of authority. Obviously, I read a lot, I watch a lot of video content, and I would say, oh, Gary Vee, he does this, or, you know, such and such does that. And that was enough. And then as I did that, a lot of people started to be like, oh, wow, Stan, like, that was really good. Like, we should do this more. Like, but all I've done is listened and asked questions.
I love that. I love that. And it's great. I mean, I remember when we had our interview, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about. I did have questions ahead of time, which I hate that anyway. And it was great. It was like so well, I won't say even choreographed. I mean, it felt for me as an interviewee, it felt like so free flowing. And I just felt like, wow, we just had like the world's best conversation. And, you know, when I watched it back, I'm like, oh, you're good. Because I was just like, you're good. I see what you're doing. And you're right. I mean, I think it's a brilliant thing. So here's a kind of it's not an off question, but, you know, I've been approached a lot. Like, for instance, I just went through this whole media blitz with one of the companies I'm running. And I have this interview that I'm still kind of writing for. And one of the questions, oddly enough, is, you know, what is leadership? Like, what does it mean to be a leader? And one of the things that I noticed, it was kind of a funny moment for me, was when we had our interview, you had actually left the company, I don't think, or either the property that we were at. And I was kind of laughing because, you know, like certain things are going wrong, or I needed certain things or whatever else. And you were just like, and like knocked it out. I'm like, he's not even an employee here anymore. And everyone was just like, you know, give me more. And I was like, clearly he's done something really, really well with his team, because they were on point, like the entire time I was staying at that particular location. So I'm curious, you know, like what is being a leader to you? Because you do it so well. I mean, I witnessed it, you know, so I'm just kind of curious what your take on it is.
Yeah, look, I think I have my theory of leadership is huge and ever expanding, and it's obviously anyone who has an answer to leadership doesn't have an answer to leadership.
I love that.
You know, so that's a thing. One thing I picked up in an interview that I did in New Zealand with a guy who runs, or is a senior lecturer for leadership at one of the universities here in Auckland. He hit me with a really good point about how, like, leadership is everywhere. It's everything. It's in everyone. And with my team, for instance, at the hotel, my job wasn't to be the leader. My job as a general manager was to help everyone else be the leaders. And by letting them take leadership over their world, and gave them that autonomy and that trust and the, I guess, the slack to do whatever they needed to do, is how I got them to perform to the level that they did. So my leadership was about empowering other people's leadership. That was my sort of take on it. But I think that if I just look selfishly at my own leadership and what I've done to be successful, it was about finding people that had the right values. So they gelled with me and the way that I led teams and the way that I wanted to grow. And that's important to know, because there are brilliant people in the world that wouldn't work well with me. We wouldn't work well together, but that doesn't mean either of us are less of a leader. We just, for any particular goal, some particular goals, we wouldn't work well together. Our leadership styles aren't suited to get the task done. Right. And I think a lot of people forget that in leadership, there's an outcome that you're trying to achieve. and that task that you're trying to achieve is so important, and it adds context to the leadership that's needed to deliver that outcome. Because for me as a leader, leading a team of managers and other leaders, my type of leadership is very different to, say, the housekeeping manager who had to lead a bunch of housekeepers to perform a certain task in a certain time frame. They needed to apply a different type of leadership. My leadership would not have worked well in that environment, and their leadership wouldn't have worked well in my environment. So to wrap that all up, I think leadership is very contextual. I think that the moment you think you know what leadership is, you definitely don't know what it is.
Love.
And that I think the more and more you can just learn about it and refine and understand that you need to apply different leadership to every situation. And some, myself included, I apply different leadership to my home life than I do to my business life and then to my social life. It's different leadership that I put in each place, because if I apply the same leadership to Claire, my partner,
she won't take a skillet to that head so fast. I know Claire. She doesn't.
There is no way.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I think about it.
Well, I really like what you said there, because you really gave me a bit of an aha moment. You know, I think we get so, especially now with COVID and everyone being sort of, you know, well, not you guys in New Zealand, but the rest of the world is not actually the rest of the world, us idiots here in the United States, being stuck at home. You know, I think, you know, a lot of people are reading a bunch of leadership books and, you know, watching every TEDx talk on the planet and all of that, and thinking that there is a sort of one size fits all approach to leadership. So you really kind of blew open the doors on that, you know, about leadership being contextual, about leadership being kind of everywhere. You know, it's really a matter of, you know, finding the right type of leadership for, you know, those particular situations, as opposed to sort of applying this general leadership, you know, construct on everyone and watching it fail, essentially. So, you know, that's great. And the funny thing is, I'm really trying to stay away from race today. So I'm help me do that, just because I've talked about race way too much and I'm kind of already over it, to be honest with you. So, but, you know, one of the things that does continue to come up is around, like, for instance, in tech, which is where I sort of cut my teeth, in both tech and finance, is that type of leadership, is understanding, you know, the very sort of, you know, sorry, we're going there, you know, white male leadership construct that's sort of, you know, set the basis for quote unquote leadership across all industries and all business. How now that's kind of breaking up a little bit in order to be a little bit more inclusive, to be more inclusive of women, to be more inclusive of people of, you know, different ethnicities, and also experientially, because what I'm also noticing is there's a bunch of youngins, so to speak, you know, coming into the C-suite and kind of trying to feel their way around. You know, unfortunately, since there isn't no real leadership school, they're just kind of doing whatever. I'm just kind of curious, like, in your experience, both in the hotel industry and other industries, and especially with the leaders that you've been speaking to, like on in your blogs, podcasts, and all of that, you know, what I won't say advice, I hate that word, like, what should they be thinking about as they diversify, both in the C-suite or as they start new companies, because you work with new CEOs as well. What are some of the things that they should really be thinking about as they continue to scale, bring on new leaders, bring on new, you know, C-suiters, all of that you just aren't seeing happening right now?
Yeah, that's a real good question. I'm nervous to put my foot in my mouth, but you know, I think the question lies before. We put so much pressure on corporations to solve the issues of society. And I guess I understand why, because money rules our world and these corporations produce all the money, and I get it. And money is, we talk diversity and inclusivity and equality. It's all driven through this financial lens quite often. And we look at how can corporations, boards be more inclusive and diverse. And I get it. I'm not saying it shouldn't be that. I definitely think there's a part to play there. I think CEOs and people who are building these companies need to ensure that they've got the education and the conversations under their belt to understand the inclusivity and the diversity. I think so. The very first thing I think is important is conversation. I actually watched this video yesterday about, I think his name was Daryl Davis, I think his name is, a Black African-American man. I don't know if you know him. He used to have conversations with, well, he has conversations with KKK members.
I know
and
exactly what
through
you're
his
talking about.
conversations, they would leave the KKK because their ignorance would sort of dissipate and they would learn more about, well, he's a real person. And that video reminded me about Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, which was essentially the same thing in the subtext of what he was saying, is like just knowing people and having that diversity of thought allows CEOs to think differently and think more diverse. And I think when you look at these older, whiter men that get all the blame and sit there, they didn't have that diversity of thought because they were surrounded, and during their careers, there were only other white men around them. And I think as the world's grown, we sort of then now cast a lens onto these older white men that, why aren't you changing with the times? And the thing is that they haven't had the conversations. So I think if one thing can happen in the corporate world is that, could we just have more conversation? Could we make it purposeful? One of the things we're doing with our Nesian network that we have here in New Zealand is having these tough conversations with Māori and Pacifica people about things that they don't usually want to talk about, which opens their eyes up to the situation and then they learn. So that's one thing in the corporate world, but I also think it just needs to start earlier. I know in the Māori and Pacifica world, which, we might not have the same history as what the Black Americans have had in terms of the way our history is, but there is still some oppression there. There's still minorities and they still have similar things that they go through. But a lot of the way that that's going to change is from the new generations having more conversations with everyone. So not trying to stick into their Māori and Pacifica groups and only stay there and try to rise up. We should all talk. We should all have conversations with each other. And I don't want it to become like just this beige world. We need to have our cultural values and all our differences, but we should know about everyone else's differences as well. I think a lot of people in these worlds where they're not as diverse and inclusive, it's because they just are ignorant, not from their fault, just because they've never been exposed. And I think that Daryl Davis has a really good point with the way he was able to get over 200 KKK members to leave the KKK, literally just through conversation.
Right. And you're right. And, wow, first of all, that's like probably the most eloquently anyone has put that in a long, long time for me. So that actually gave me a nice big fat exhale. So thank you. And no, you didn't put your foot in your mouth. But I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that, I grew up on a farm in Texas, a little poor farm boy. And it's funny, I had kind of a weird relationship with race. I knew kind of where I fit in, so to speak. So, there was no sort of denying that, it's like, here's this group, there's really not that much intermingling. But I was also one of those exploratory kids. So, I would sort of hang out with my white friends and we would kind of, we were fine. We were kids. So we were like, I'm okay. Well, I guess our parents are weird with each other. That's kind of strange, but okay. But hey, do you still want to play tennis on Saturday? So we go and play for hours and everything else. And I remember one of my best friends' dads was like, you could just tell he had racist blood in him. But the funny thing is he ended up really kind of embracing me at some point, at least to his comfort level. And a lot of it just had to do with what you said, conversation, having that exposure, having to give the little black kid a ride home, and listening to the conversation. I come from California, so that was all, instantly, sort of fascinating to him. And we talked and had, ended up developing a bit of a relationship where you would just never, ever see that on paper, and I believe, to your point where you said that, we are looking at racism under the lens of business, and it's kind of hard. It's difficult to really, I should say race, not necessarily racism, but it's difficult to really, I think we're conflating the two, and that's causing a lot of just derision. I think a lot of people are just, it's either or, and it's not the case. And you're right. I've always pushed for, just open communication. If you give people some exposure, that allows them to think and create their own, maybe even poke holes in their own theories. That's really why I teach. That's why I do what I do. That's why diatribe exists, is to really allow people to sort of hear a different version of what they've accepted as truth their entire lives, and maybe kind of shatter some of those, some of those beliefs based on, what could be versus what they were told. So thank you for that. That was beautifully put. I want to actually talk about your Nesian network. I mean, I again, this is one of those moves where I'm just like popcorn. I'm just watching. I'm like, oh my God, he's so killing it right now. First of all, just give us sort of like an overview of what it is, first of all, and then why it. First of all, it's become a thing, which I'm like super jealous because I'm not Polynesian and Maori, but that's okay. But at the same time, I'm so obsessed with it just because it's you guys you're doing the thing, and I'm really trying to like learn as much as I can from you guys and apply it even to my own tribe, just because it's so well done and so well attended.
Yeah, nah, cool. Thank you. It was an idea. Okay, so when I moved back to New Zealand.
Give us some backstory on that, by the way. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you earlier, but
Yeah, I moved back to New Zealand, and I guess my eyes started to open up again because I was having these conversations with Māori and Pacifica business owners and colleagues. And I had been away from New Zealand for 12 years, so I hadn't been exposed to that world as much as I had been. And, Australia is as wide as America is, and that's where I was for a lot of that time. And I wasn't exposed to, I guess, my cultures and the world that I grew up in. And so it opened my eyes up again a little bit to be like, wow, like this part of my culture is something I kind of want to get back to and learn more about. I knew that I didn't know enough about it either. And then so anyway, I made some friendships with some Māori and Pacifica people, and I started going to these networking events, and there was a few of us that would always hang around. We'd always see each other. But that was it. Like there was a room of 200 people, and there's maybe 5 of us who are Māori or Pacifica. And we would think, well, where is everyone else? And then when we did see them, they would just be quiet in the corner, not saying a whole lot. But so we were thinking, well, how do we get more of our people to these events? We talk about wanting this diversity and inclusiveness, but we're not showing up either. We're not showing up to the party where everyone else is. So how are they going to let us in if we're not there to have the conversation in the first place? And so we thought, can we create a space where it's safer for them to come together? We can force conversations on them that talks about why aren't you out there? Why aren't you doing the thing with everyone else? And months went on and we kept on talking about it. And then COVID happened. And we thought, you know what? We have no excuses. We're all sitting at home in our pajamas. Let's make this happen and get it done. And we did. We just put it up. Who knew what was going to happen? We just did the thing, got it up and live. And we just said to ourselves, let's make this something. Let's make it not a typical webinar or some Zoom meeting that everyone would just get on and chatter. Let's put some structure behind it. Let's get some speakers. Let's force people into positions where they didn't want to be, but we knew was probably good for them because they were going to have the conversations. And so we did that. So our Zoom meetings were definitely not a webinar. You couldn't sit there with your camera off on Zoom and just listen, because we threw you into breakout rooms of random people and you had to start doing your pitch. And so that was what Nesian Network became. And it was a really cool environment where it started to grow because we started getting some quite good speakers. Again, to our point earlier in this conversation, we just asked them, hey, would you like to come and speak for 5 to 7 minutes to a bunch of Māori and Pacifica business owners and professionals? And they all put their hand up. They're all in COVID too. So, they all were sitting in their pajamas too. So they had time. And it just grew from strength to strength over lockdown. As we got towards the end of lockdown, and those conversations that we kept having were growing, we decided, well, we need to start meeting in person, obviously, but this network was international. We had people in LA, we had people in Hawaii, we had people in Dubai and Brisbane and Melbourne. And so we thought, look, we can't do anything there at the moment. Let's just do an Auckland one. And we started doing some Auckland chapters, Auckland catch-ups, and it's just grown into that. We just force people into conversations. We put money and business at the forefront of everything we do, and just radical transparency and honesty at the forefront. Like it's like we talked about leadership earlier, and my leadership at Nesian Network is quite authoritarian. It's very much get in here and do the thing. Like,
Got
come here and sit there. And because it had to be in that environment where people were shy, they didn't want to do things. We were putting them in uncomfortable situations. And it's not just Māori and Pacifica. A lot of people go to networking events and they just stand in the corner with their friends and they don't meet other people and they're not talking to strangers, as we talked about. So we would round them off and, and put them into groups, and you didn't know these people, go have a chat and do your 1 minute presentation with each other of who you are and why you're here. And that dynamic of our group allowed people to really open up and meet random people. There's all this business that's happening in between us, and we're trying to teach them skills to be able to then go off to other networking events and apply those same skills there and feel comfortable about doing it and understanding that it is a good thing. And so, yeah, look, it's still early days. We've done 13 of them so far over the last 4 months or whatever. And we've got a few lined up into the future. And we'll just keep doing it. It's not a money spinner for us. We don't use it to drive revenue in itself. We obviously know that being the host of the party has its own benefits and, the authority that comes from that. So there's benefit for all our businesses, and all our businesses have benefited from it. Definitely. But the network itself has just been such a cool way to, one, get back in touch with my culture and the people in my culture. And one big thing that a lot of people pretty much outside of North Island and New Zealand mostly, but New Zealand, let's say, don't understand the divide between Māori and Pacifica that is in this country. And they are all Polynesians, but New Zealand, it is the Māori's homeland.
Right.
And the Pacifica people have come here. And so there was almost a segregation between the two. Wow. And our job was we should all be in the same room. We can't just split ourselves up into more minorities. That was the tactics of apartheid. Split up as many people into smaller groups as possible so they don't have as much power. So one of our things was, let's bring them all in, the whole group of us. More of us together, the stronger it is. So that's been one of the other things we've played out. And yeah, probably the best thing I've done since moving back to New Zealand. Actually, it is the best thing I've done since moving back.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you were doing some pretty fantastic things, but this is next level in such a way that it feels almost like it almost feels life-changing. I mean, I think that's something that you'll realize down the line as you continue to grow the network and as you continue to empower people and provide that community that wasn't there before. Like, I mean, I've literally watched you build a community of people who are so ardent and so connected and in there that, I can't even imagine what that's going to look like, 2 years from now. So, kudos again. You've got all my respect on that. One thing just to sort of, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one thing I wanted to sort of chat about also is, I know a lot of people right now are sort of in a transitional phase. They're trying to figure out, what do I do? It's not, for some people it's trial by fire just because they've been let go, for instance, made redundant, furloughed, whatever you want to call it. And they're kind of now dusting off dreams and really kind of diving into, building a brand, trying to figure out a way, the steps to go from, nobody on the street to having an audience, to creating, an ardent, audience. I did it, you've done it. And, built out something where you can sort of leverage all of that network, the time, your voice, all of that. So I'm just kind of curious. I don't want to, I hate like, give me your top 5. It's not that. I think, if you had some advice from someone, for instance, who had always wanted to sort of, build a brand, to become a speaker or to do something that, is more public facing, what would you tell them, maybe some of the things along the way to sort of look out for, or things that they may want to concentrate on right now in order to start that process?
Yeah, real good question. I've thought about this a lot lately of like, what did I do that I could have done better, or what did I do that really worked? And to our points earlier, the two main things was the hard work and the network. And hard work, it's really not the right term, but I don't know anything better to say. But because I didn't see it as hard, it was just things I had to do, activities. And I read about this in some book about the 3,000 rule, and that it takes, and it's just a made up number, but it takes a certain amount of activity to build some success. And in this particular article, it was 3,000 activities to get to the successful point. And you can take 3 years to get through 3,000, or you can take 3 months. And it's just about the activity, the level of activity. It's a compound interest effect where it just keeps building. And so when I talk about hard work, it's not necessarily hard and it's not necessarily work. It's just a bunch of activity that you want to do quickly. And I think the reason why you want to do it quickly is that not a lot of people have 2 years of running costs in their bank. They can't just sit there and, oh, we'll take our time, we'll do this slowly and get there. And also something I learned moving here, which I didn't think was going to be a problem because of the multi-unit businesses I'd run in the past, but you can't do everything. And I've learned that pretty hard. Like recently as well, you know, as one side of my business takes off more than others, it's really hard to focus on other things and not give all the attention to the one that's doing well. And so I think that if I was to give some advice to people is, yeah, do lots of activity, do it fast. You don't, unless you have 2-3 years running costs and you can take your time, or you have a really supportive partner who can bankroll you until you've got it to that point. I mean, lots of people do it that way, and that's a fantastic way to do it. So that's one thing. Do lots of activity, figure out your running costs. For me, my running cost was 18 months. We had put away 18 months worth of income to come here, or living costs. And we, I guess, for lack of a better word, we ate shit for the first 10 months of us being here. We house sat, so we didn't have to pay rent. We did all these things where we didn't have to spend this money, so it went longer. And the reason I say that is that I didn't have to make bad decisions or needy decisions to get money.
Right.
While I built out what I wanted to do in this dream, because money wasn't the guiding factor, because I had the safety egg, a safety nest. So that's something to think about when you want to go in to do your own business. A lot of people go, oh, I want to do this business. I've got 20 grand. I'm going to go all in. And it's like, well, you got 20 grand. Like, you better get that done in a month.
Right.
You're going to run out of money real quick. And even when you get down to like half of that money, now you're already getting these decisions come into your head going, oh, I should do this and I should do that. And maybe they're the wrong decision. So that's why I do a lot of activity, do as much as possible. Those activities are building your network. The one regret I have from my time as a GM was not building out a better network when I was getting paid to do it.
Right.
I was getting a really handsome salary. I could have spent all that time to build out a massive network, bigger than I have now. And I could have walked straight out of my job straight into income, and I didn't do that. And you know, I had many advisors and many staff and people more experienced than me telling me the whole way through, Stan, you've got to do this. You've got to do this. No, I don't need to do it. I've come this far without it. Arrogant young man as you are.
We're all guilty of that one, my friend.
And so that those are my two things. And then the third thing is, what I'm learning now is, and I sort of just touched on it a bit all over the place, but is say yes to everything originally. You've got to say yes. You just don't know what's going to stick. And most people are like, oh, you need this really good business plan. You need to do all the work and get it prepared. But like by the time you've done all that, it's shifted, it's moved on. You don't like it anymore. Who knows? Get out and test everything until you refine it, until you get the product that it is that you have now. So I think, and then once you get to that point where something's working, then allow yourself to start saying no again and saying, no, my time is valuable. I can't take on everything. I wish I could, but I can't. And I'll be doing a disservice to the people and the customers and the staff that I have now if I say yes to all these other things. So that's been a real hard part of my last probably 3 weeks of just starting to say no to things, as I realized my business is growing to a point where I need to give it all my focus. And if I didn't cut other things, then I would have to cut time with Claire and, you know, my loved ones, which is something I didn't want to sacrifice. So
Absolutely not.
I had to cut these other co-curricular activities, if you want to put it. So to wrap it up, the 3 things is do the work, do the activity that you need to get done, whatever that looks like in your world. Ensure that you can say yes to everything, but say no to when you've found that one thing, or you found those things that do it. But say at the beginning, you have to say yes to everything. You don't know what's going to work. You just don't know. You could have the best idea and it'll turn into nothing. And the third one is just grow your networks while you can. Like if there's anyone who's young or getting employed and has a good job and has the ability during that job to build a network, do it. Like, oh gosh, I wish I did that,
100%, 100%. And thank you for saying that, because, even I coach like executive assistants, for instance, and one of the questions I ask is, hey, I mean, how many of you, obviously you have access to all your boss's network just because, by default, how many of you are actually creating separate relationships with the people in that network? Yes, your bosses, or the person you support is the sort of harbinger of that, or the sort of provider of that. But at the same time, I'm a big believer that part of having a brand is really creating those relationships, those separate relationships with people, especially if you have access to them on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. And because inevitably, when you leave, and you will at some point, like you said, you could literally walk right out, send 2 or 3 emails and be like, hey, I'm actually looking for a new role. We've worked together for many years. We talk all the time. Do you know of anyone who may be looking? Are you looking? That sort of thing. And that has been the one sort of unicorn, superpower I've had, because I've done that, exactly that. I've always made sure that I had sort of separate relationships with people in a network that was literally handed to me. Like, you know what I mean? So.
Yep, exactly.
Really.
And I was reading that. I just read a Tim Ferriss book, Tall of Titans,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about his investing career and how he had all these opportunities to invest in startups, but he had that because of the network he had. And he was quite honest about his privilege in these networks that he was just right place, right time, knew the right people, and he leveraged those people really well. And he talks about it a lot. That's how he built his podcast to where it is. He's leveraged all those contacts. They've led him on to other people, and then they allowed him to invest in some of these startups that maybe only very few people at that seed level would have been able to. And now, in his own words, it's 10x all the other revenue he's ever made is the investing stuff, and it's just through those relationships.
And exactly. And again, another sort of endorsement of networks. Really paying attention and mining those networks, obviously feeding them, but mining them at the same time. And if you build it, it's so much easier to actually leverage it. And I think a lot of people, again, back to what you said about, really having boots on the ground, really doing the hard work. It's not as hard as you think it is. It's really building the muscle. When you do it enough times, you don't even think twice about it. Clearly, if you can do 20 or 30 interviews in a week, I doubt you were, pissing your pants every single interview or every single, ask for time. It just becomes almost automatic and instinctual. So I love the advice. I think it's brilliant advice, and it's stuff that people should definitely heed and just do it. Just try it. It can't suck, or it can't. It could suck, but it can't hurt. Obviously, it's all upside as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now things are going to get a little weird, so I'm just going to give you a little heads up on that one. I just kidding. It's not that deep. Just some slightly deeper questions and maybe more thoughtful. And they're simple questions. And you actually already answered this one again, but maybe again, I'll ask it. What makes you proud? Like in the last, why don't we look at your transition from Melbourne to New Zealand? Like, what makes you proudest, kind of looking back over it?
This is a quite interesting question, actually. It's quite a personal question, but I have always been a fairly, I've never cared what people think about me. I've just never. And that's led on to me not really caring a whole bunch for lots of people. And, I still have my family and things, but my proudest moment is watching mine and Claire's relationship evolve over this last sort of 10 months and how strong it got because of we were each other's rock. And that sounds sort of cliched, but it literally was, because we didn't have a home. Claire was in a country she had never lived in. I was in a country I hadn't been in my whole adult life. And we have grown so much as a couple that we have already achieved our life goal, I think, of doing whatever we want, whenever we want, and helping as many others do the same. It's not something we will stay in if we don't work on it. So it's a goal we have to continue to improve. But I mean, we quite often will turn to each other and just be like, what is life? Like, this is awesome. Like, we have just got the best life. I remember I left here and where I'm living, and I walked up the road down Ponsonby Road, which is one of the coolest streets in Auckland to live on or to be on. And I could walk there in 2 minutes to go have a meeting with a potential investor for a project we're working on. And I left a voice message on Claire's phone just saying, what is even like? I just walked from our apartment to there to have a conversation with some investor I don't even know. That's probably going to go ahead. And then I'm going to come back home to you. Like, that's my most proudest moment. It's like, we're just living this life that we wanted, and I can do whatever I want. And my relationship with Claire has just evolved into this just this coolest thing that I never thought was possible. So that's definitely my proudest moment. Just what has happened with how my relationship with Claire has evolved and how strong it's become.
I love that. I love that. And I love it more just because I love Claire, but I'm a little biased anyway. Okay. But I adore you both. And I've watched that sort of evolve. Like, I've watched you two. I'm envious because you've literally become the power couple that I've always wanted, in my life. I've watched, and I do love the fact that you mentioned the fact that you guys have had to be each other's rock. I mean, this was like a leap of faith, like you would not believe. And I always had faith. I just, in the time that I'd spent with you and really sort of like absorbed your energy, I was like, oh, they'll be fine. There might be some rough patches because that's a big move and it's stressful. And especially when you don't really have a house and you're doing the house sitting and all that, I was just like, oh Lord, praying for you, praying. But also just watching you guys just, really feed off each other's energy, really support one another, and really sort of like circle your own wagons. Like, you didn't need anyone else. Obviously, you pull in the energy of everyone else, but you guys really, really focused and you got it done. And just, again, watching you just continue. I remember it's like that pebble in the water, and watching like each of those waves, the concentric circles just sort of grow and grow, and it's really inspiring. So thank you for saying that. And I think, again, we don't talk about this enough in a business context, because there's always someone that has someone else's back. Be it, in my case, I'm single, but my mom is my rock. You know what I mean? So there's that relationship, and I think we don't give our partners enough credit a lot of times for our own success. We love to, kind of be the big, bright, shiny object, but it takes a village,
Oh, I could not have done what I've done without Claire, because my like natural personality style isn't one to go out and meet 20 to 30 people a week. The thought of that a year ago is just the worst thing ever to do. But my thought in my back of my mind was always like, Claire and I made a pact to get to this life. And so all I had to think when I didn't want to do something was like, oh, I'm letting Claire down. Like, I'm letting her down if I don't do this, because this is going to lead us to that forever goal that we've got. And that was enough. And so I never, like, people look at me now who knew me in the past and like, what are you doing? Like, this is, you've changed like completely. And I was like, yeah, like I have done stuff that scared the hell out of me. But because I had Claire behind me the whole way, it was nothing. It didn't even faze me one bit.
I love that. I love that. Well done. Okay. Hold on. Check the clock. Okay. One last question. I got to make it a doozy because that's what I do on the last questions. How about this? It's way grand, but whatever. What would you, I'd say for 2021, what would you like, if you had maybe a magic wand, and you can be as cheesy as you want to be, what would you like to sort of see in the world? And since this is more of a business type of conversation, what would you like to sort of see in business in 2021 that you're not seeing, that you haven't seen in all the years past?
It is a doozy.
Mm-hmm.
What would I like to see?
And be as idealistic as you want. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, no, there's so much there. I think that, I think, to be honest, what I'd like to see in the world in terms of business and money is I would like to see more education around it. One of the things I really want to do, and I have been trying to do part of my time here in New Zealand, is to educate more youth about business and money, and just life and what you can do with life. I think that today's world, I mean, everyone knows today's completely changed. What I do for a living wasn't even a job 5 years ago. You know, like it's just world's moving. These kids that are coming up through the world now, they still don't know financial literacy. They don't know about business. They don't know how these sorts of things work. Majority of them don't. Like so many people I talk to in business now, they don't know the fundamentals of finance and business. And then we wonder why these SMEs and SMBs and stuff aren't, like, you know, they fall over all the time. That the statistics of businesses failing is really high. That if you can get to the second year, it's like, you know, and I think that a lot of that comes from because people start businesses because they're very good at what they do, but that is nowhere near enough to run a business. You know, just because you're good at something doesn't mean anything when it comes to running a business. Running a business is a beast of a thing to try to do. So if I could, I think that what I would like to see in 2021, what I'd like more emphasis put on is educating kids, teenagers about business, about money, and really give them a proper education about it, so that at least these conversations we talked about, at least having those conversations with them, so when they go to decide, I'm going to start my own business, they understand the ramifications of that decision. You know, because you hear, like right now, all these small businesses all around the world are folding because they're already on a nice edge. Something like this happens, they completely fold, and it's not their fault. Like they have the governments provide a platform to make business easy, which is good, and I agree with that. I think it should be, but they don't give the right education early on, so that when people make that decision to start a business, to understand the ramifications of what they're taking on. And I think when people talk about me taking this leap of faith, I knew it. I'd run big hotels and big business and things. I knew business. So when I ran my own business, yeah, it might have been a leap of faith because I'm doing a new industry, but actually business is business, and I had the fundamental knowledge. Lots of people throughout my career are like, oh, when are you going to start your own restaurant and bar? I remember I was a food and beverage director of a $15 million food and beverage operation. And I said, I don't know anything about running my own business. Like, what are you talking about? You run a 15 million? And I was like, yeah, but I don't know anything about HR. I know nothing about finance, maintenance. Like, I run the operations of a food and beverage thing. And lots of people who do that, they'll go out, oh, well, I can run this bar, so I'm going to go do this. It's like, yeah, but you didn't do the finance, payroll, HR. There's all this other things. So to answer your question, just business and financial literacy from an early age, from all the way from 5 years old at start of school, all the way through school. It should be as mandatory as English and mathematics and science. It should be there, because I think that we want people to create businesses. We really want them to. I think SMEs play a massive part of the economy, and I think they're an important part, but I think people need to know what they're getting into before they do it.
I agree. And that's incredibly well put. And I couldn't agree more. It's one of the initiatives that I'm actually trying to push even within my own tribe of really giving people, business acumen. You would think that this would have been taught in school. I never learned it in school either. I mean, luckily I had great on-the-job training supporting CEOs. So yay me. But, that in a weird way makes me a unicorn. I think it's one of those things that people should be definitely teaching, or countries specifically should be teaching as part of their curriculum. So, well, my friend, thank you. Seriously, this was about as amazeballs as it gets. I love speaking with you because you always make me feel better about living in general. and I can't wait to see you at some point when Jacinda lets me in the country. I'm going to try to sneak in. I mean, there's a little sketchy boat dude that I've reached out to see if he can sneak me around in the middle of the night and get me on a remote island or something, and I'll sleep on a volcano and just
you need to get on the team of one of the America's Cup yachts.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Then I can actually stay in the country. So thank you again. And I'll definitely, I'll link everything at the end of this video to Nesian Network, as well as any other projects that you're working on. Awesome. And thank you again. So,
thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure indeed. So everyone, thank you again for watching yet another episode of Diatribe. As you know, we're always on one. And if you're actually interested in becoming a guest on Diatribe, please DM me in the comments. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.